Hopefully you can hear me okay. Let me just get a little bit closer. Alright. Well, it is 2:55 in the morning here, but I took a late nap and slept way too late, so I was watching documentaries and decided to make a little video. Nice to see all of you guys. So, from the beginning of my descent into madness, I've connected a lot of goddesses together as sort of a multi-goddess godhead, so to speak. And these goddesses were linked together through commonalities. And some of these characters are also linked together through commonalities. We have the archetype of the descent into the underworld. This is done in a ton of different mythologies, a ton of different stories, everything from Odysseus going to the underworld, Orpheus, as we've talked about before, going to the underworld. This is a common trope that repeats itself over and over again, but perhaps the first recorded version of a character, a goddess in this case, going into the underworld is Ishtar, or Astarte, or Inanna, as she's known. She is a very complex character. The reason I'm making a video about her tonight is because this Mesopotamian goddess is a very important part of a symbol I've seen for years. Everything from Fantasia 2 to The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, there is this symbol of this white tree, the white tree of Gondor. This tree represents, I think, the tree of life. Perhaps it's something more than that, but I've seen this white tree over and over and over again. It's carved atop of Hammurabi's laws that they have in Babylon. It's it's across from the Ishtar Gates, this white tree looking symbol. It's at the top of a famous Hittite city. I can't remember the name of it as well. On the gates, there's two lions, and then the white tree at the very top of the gate. This white tree is referenced over and over again in fiction as well. I'm like, well, it has to symbolize something. I found the root, the root of this white tree, so to speak. And it's probably the reason that the video server Hulu is named Hulu. The name of the tree is called the Hulupsu, or Hulupsu, excuse me, Huluppz. This tree was apparently one of the last things to survive the wrath of the goddess of the underworld. What her name is Ereshkigal. Whenever she got angered that Enki went into the underworld on his boat, whenever he set sail for the underworld, she let loose a huge destruction, Ereshkigal. And this destruction destroyed all of the trees along the river, so it was probably some kind of dramatic flood, I imagine, which, took place at the end of the Younger Dryas 12,800 years ago. But one of the last trees to get uprooted was this white tree, and it floated down the river. I think this represents society getting uprooted by the flood, or civilization, because one of the main conclusions I've come to through these 3 years, I've seen this white tree symbol and tried to identify what it meant. I think it represents the reblooming of human civilization, the tree of life, in that sense, because it reblooms at the end of Fantasia 2, which I've made videos about as well. And it's replanted by Cernunnos, or Kronos, this in his deer form, what we would consider the Golden Age Saturn, in the end of the Fantasia 2, which is full of symbols for magicians. If you haven't seen it before, it is very esoteric. But the point being that this white tree was uprooted by Ereshkigal, went down the Euphrates, and it was collected by Ishtar. Ishtar then set it up and planted it again. Ishtar is seen as not only the queen of heaven in Babylon, Akkadian, Sumerian, Mesopotamian mythology, an extremely powerful goddess. This goddess is the head of civilization. You see, she went down into the abyss and talked to Enki and had a drinking contest with him where they drank a honey draught. Honey repeats itself a lot in Sumerian mythology, as you will see. They got drunk, and since she is such a badass goddess, not only the goddess of love and sex and fertility, but of war, she drank Enki under the table. Enki, being the god of wisdom, was, like most men in power, started throwing out gifts to this goddess, Ishtar and Yana. Gave her basically civilization, gave her art, music, creativity, agriculture, architecture, the ability to build houses, the ability to weave, everything, like pottery, like everything you need for a concentrated civilization in the Mesopotamian region. He set her up as not only the queen of heaven, but the queen of earth, the queen of civilization. She carries with her a measuring rod and a coil. This measuring rod is to mark out perimeters for a city, and the coil of rope is, if you stick this stick in the ground, use the rope, you can make circles, you can lay down the stick twice at angles using the rope and make, right angles. You can, there's every form of architecture you need to build, you can build with these two very simple ancient symbols of culture. The circle with the line underneath it. This eventually was attached by a handle, and we got the ankh of ancient Egyptian symbolism. But it's really just the coil and the coil of rope and the measuring rod. This is why the measuring rod is brought back in the book of Revelation, and the staff, or the shepherd's staff, was used by not only Jesus Christ, but Inyana's husband, called Dumuzi or Tammuz, respectively. Ishtar, Tammuz, and Dumuzi, Inyana. He was the shepherd. What's up, Susie? This shepherd mating with this Ishtar was also very sexually promiscuous. She talked about her sexual proclivity and her beauty, specifically the beauty of her naked feminine form. Her ability to arouse men was like key amongst her. She uses her femininity to take her brother Utu, who is the god of agriculture, and basically get him to take raw flax from the field and turn it into bed sheets for her. And then she's like, well, who won't take my bedroom, brother, now that I have sheets? And he's like, well, you can't take me, I'm sorry, I did all this shit for you because you asked me, but that's as far as I'm going. You can go with Dumuzi. He's a shepherd guy. He's got good milk, He's good for the fertility. They end up falling in love. This is very Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ. This, eventually comes from this mythos. But this is extremely the Persephone and Hades, because this is the same exact idea. Same exact idea as Alice. Same exact idea as Orpheus. Eventually, Ishtar goes into the underworld. Eventually, her husband dies. Her husband has to spend half of the year in the underworld, just like Persephone has to spend half the year in the underworld, because he is so key to the fertility of the land, being not only the god of shepherds and a descendant of Enki himself, but his wife is more fertile whenever she is pleased sexually. This is where we get the Sumerian idea of the priest king going into his concubine, his harem, and pulling a concubine from his harem for every night of the year or however often, specifically for 40 days, which eventually became the 40 days of Lent. During this period we call the Weeping of Tammuz, or the Weeping of Tammuz. This is a ceremony that's mentioned in the Bible in Ezekiel. Whenever Ezekiel goes into, or whenever the Hebrew get taken into Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar, Ezekiel actually writes down that the women are still performing the ceremony in the river Euphrates. They're weeping into the river for the 40 days before the summer solstice. This is to bring rain down from the sky, to bring fertility back to the crops. This is a ceremony where the women literally go into the river to weep for the fallen husband of Ishtar, the husband that was dragged to hell by 5 demons. 5 demons that were told, because Ishtar was freed from the underworld, that they had to go back into the land of the living with her and extract their toll, which was another soul, to drag back down to the underworld with her. The first person the demons approached was the loyal servant of Ishtar, which believed in her every step of the way and mourned her greatly whenever she left, and continued her priestess duties in the absence of her goddess. Ishtar said, "No, don't take her. She's a loyal follower." Second person that the demons tried to steal the soul of is Utu, her brother, the god of agriculture. And she's like, "No, my brother mourned my loss. Like the fact that I died. He's weeping still. He's observed the 40 days of mourning." And then she gets to her husband, and her husband's sitting on the throne that she gave him. She gave him the fucking throne. And he's sitting there with his fucking legs kicked back, playing the fucking flute. And she's like, "You know what? This guy doesn't even care that I'm dead. You can drag his ass off to hell." And he's like, "No, no, no." And he weeps to Shamash, who is the god of, the sun god, basically, a brother of Ishtar, and says, "Please, you were buddies. I gave you a wedding gift. That one time I gave you a wedding gift. Could you please not let me get dragged to hell by 5 demons?" So Shamash is like, "Yeah, I guess I'll turn you into a fucking snake or something." So he turns into a snake and goes off, and then the demons back up with him again. And he's like, "Shamash, I know you turned me into a snake and shit to get me away from these demons, but could you hook a brother up and turn me into a gazelle so I could get away?" So he does that and repeats the process over and over again. The animals he tends to take the form of, though, are animals that repeat themselves in an earlier story, which I fucking completely stopped talking about. The white tree. The white tree that Nergashel, now it's escaping me. The goddess of hell and death, Ereshkigal, that she destroys, uproots, and Ishtar replants. This tree is extremely interesting. This white tree. Turns out the Hulu tree, as I'm calling it, because it's the easiest way to call it, the Hulu tree. This tree has a snake at its base, a snake that cannot be charmed. And in its branches it has the Anu bird, which is very similar to Anunnaki, the Anu bird. It dwells in its branches. Yep, just me and you, Suze. The Anu bird in its branches, the snake in its roots. And guess who dwells in the trunk of this tree, this white willow tree. This is why willow trees were so important. I didn't realize this. The white willow tree. And mind you, the tree of Gondor, the white tree of Gondor, and the tree from that Disney movie I was telling you about, Fantasia 2, were both willow-esque looking. And I just knew that willows were important, but this is a white willow tree. Guess who dwells in the trunk of this tree? The dark maiden Lilith. This is before she goes to the Garden of Eden and hooks up with Adam. She dwells in the trunk of the tree. And in fact, this tree becomes so impressive that Ishtar says, "I want this tree for myself." this tree of civilization, this white tree of life, this tree of culture, which you got to remember that culture, that's where we get the word cult from. And her cult existed until like the 1800s. So, and it still kind of does in the form of Alice in Wonderland, which started also in the 1800s. Look how many tarot card decks they have for Alice in Wonderland, the goddess that went into the underworld. And Wonderland was this underland, but of course, Lewis Carroll, who was actually, I think his last name was Dodkins, couldn't speak very well. He had a stutter, so he said Dodskins. I think that's his last name. But he couldn't, like I said, either he couldn't pronounce Underworld very well, or the little 6-year-old girl Alice he wrote it for couldn't say Wonderland or Underland and said Wonderland instead. I think that was the case. But anyways, her cult dies off at the same time that Alice in Wonderland starts up. And she has to go through several trials as well. And eventually is allowed to escape by little creatures that Inky helps form out of dirt from under his fingernails that he sends after. Like these little sexually ambiguous androgynous creatures that he shuffles off down into the underworld that float around like flies and then go to the Queen of Hell, Ereshkigal, and perform for her so that they can trick her and then get the body of Ishtar back, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, the white tree. Lilith lives in the trunk. Birds live in Annie birds, kind of like angels. I think of this very much like the figure 8, the real tree of life and death, or knowledge and life. The as above and the so below, and the crossroads in between. This Anu bird and the snake below, very, very, very similar to Norse mythology. And in place of Lilith, you have the 3 Norns. And I believe Lilith is just a representation of the 3 Norns, or Hecate, however you want to say it. And it is, you can't pronounce it both ways. The root words, look into it. But the tree was so impressive to Ishtar that she tells Gilgamesh to come. And she's like, hey, Gilgamesh. And this is back when she's still in her prime, before she's, all tore to hell up by Tammuz. The shepherd god who laid it in her pretty good. She's like, hey, Gilgameshy. Hey, Mesh, you wanna mesh pets? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, well, can you do me a favor? And he's like, yeah, anything, baby. And she's like, there's a really badass tree that I planted a while ago. There's a lady living in there now. Could you get her out? And, these birds and snakes, could you just get rid of those? So he kills the snake that cannot be charmed, forces the Anu birds to flee the branches, and Lilith runs to Eden and shacks up with Adam. Which is funny because not only does Aphrodite come from Ishtar, but also she transforms into a male figure around the time of the end of the age of Taurus and a transition to the age of Aries. It becomes Adonis. So Adonis becomes Adam whenever it becomes Hebraized and into the age of Aries. And you have Ishtar, basically, in the form of Adam, or like I said, Adonis, hooking up first with Lilith before Eve. This is basically a regenerification, which happens a lot whenever you have different civilizations and changes in ages. What's up, Claire? So she convinces Gilgamesh through seduction to cut down this white tree. This white tree, she takes the branches and forms for it a crown for Gilgamesh. Since he is the king of Uruk, he needs something to symbolize his dominionship. So he wears the top of the tree as a crown on his head, which I think is also symbolic for the chakra or energy system. which trees always are, obviously. Also, birds and snakes are. I mean, even in the Aztecs, the Mexican flag, you have a bird and a snake. It's just, snake's dominion over the bird. People like Corey Good and David Wilcock will tell you this is because of the blue avians and the lizard people, but this is not the case. This is a representation of energy pathways. This is why you see an Ouroboros sometimes with two snakes, each biting each other's tails, and one of the sets of snakes will have wings. This represents a more downward side magic, a left-handed path, with emphasis, a little bit of emphasis on the wings, or the top part of the tree. Or if you combine the two, you have the feathered serpent, or the dragon, which is supposed to be like the middle path. But in this respect, they made Lilith the dark goddess, the dark maiden, the female hermit, the mother of the esoteric female magic, the high priestess, basically. They made her the center, the middle path between the two pillars, between Joachim and Boaz, red or blue, eagle or snake, up or down, roots or branches. She was the trunk that connected the two together. The trunk was turned into the throne of Ishtar, which she used to rule over people from her seat at the... it says heaven, but it presents it in a way which is like an ethereal plane, but also above, so it can observe everything. But this is what she uses to make her throne, and from the roots where the snake was, that's what she uses to make her bed, which is also very interesting, because the bed is a place of slumber, or the place of dreams, the nether realm, the unseen, untapped, which is very accurate for underground, right? For the subconscious, for what you can't perceive and often forget when you spring back into reality, just as one forgets a dream. This is why, you have gods of night, Nyx, shout out to Vanna Nyx. You have Nyx having been the mother of Hypnos, and Morpheus, the god of sleep and dreams, or gods rather of sleep and dreams. But this triple goddess Hecate is formed within the idea of the high priestess, or Lilith, or basically the Alice Sophia paradox, because the triple goddess is not only the maiden, the mother of the crone, but past, present, and future, and creation, life, and destruction, very much like Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. I mixed them all up right there, but same triune idea. A triple-faced Janus of sorts. But the same thing that Enki gave to Ishtar, which fire and torches, and dominionship over birds and beasts. These are symbols you see presented oftentimes next to Hecate. Hecate often has, two birds of some kind next to her, whether they be ravens, owls, sparrows, occasionally even doves. Oh, you're reading Valis. No, did you get the email? I only got yours 2 days after it's sent. I haven't gotten your email yet, but I always try to stick towards the middle path, but sometimes you have to arc back around to it. There's my I know someone who would be better able to answer that question than I am. But it just depends on the situation. Just remember, everything's polarity and everything's a wave. For every trough, you have a peak. For every valley, you have a mountain. For every A, you have a V. For every pyramid, there is the antechamber below the pyramid. That's why all pyramids have a secret subterranean layer, and then a progression upwards. This is the descent and the rise. This is the the journey of Ishtar into the underworld, the journey of Tammuz into the underworld to be brought back up. See, Persephone coming back up to make sure that her mother Demeter is happy is what gives us spring. This is what Tammuz coming back up out of the underworld and making Ishtar happy is what gives us spring before that. I will definitely check my email though, Suze. Yeah, it's things have been a little bit tight. Looking for jobs and shit. Anyways, yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Ishtar and her significance and the white tree and civilization and Hulu. Isn't that neat? Hulu probably gets its name from that white tree. I bet if I were to look up Hulu like logos and Hulu marketing, I'd see a lot of tree metaphors. I wonder. I'm going to look into this. The Hulup-Soo. Hulup-Soo. Even sounds cool. A lot of things do from Babylon, though. Ereshkigal is fun to say. So is Nergal, god of plague and death. But yeah. Dude, don't worry about it, Claire. Alice provides one way or another. Boop. You gotta have that in the corner. Nergal. Or Nergal. Sometimes it's spelled Gal. Have you ever noticed that sometimes things, as they move across continents or through ages, you'll have different words that will have the syllables interposed? For instance, Ishtar, whenever she got pissed off at Gilgamesh because Gilgamesh called her an old whore, basically, she went up to her dad and she's like, "Dad, Gilgamesh called me an old whore. What should I do?" And he's like, "Baby, just don't worry about it." She's like, "Nah, give me that bull of heaven. I want to fucking stomp his ass into the ground." So her dad's like, "Ah, okay." So he gave her the winged bull of heaven, which I think represents the age of Taurus, and also the toroid meteor shower, which probably happened in the age of Taurus, which rained down like the hooves of a bull on planet Earth as it passed through the toroid meteor belt in the age of Taurus. And you have this destruction, probably of places that we, call Sodom and Gomorrah now today from the Bible. These places were probably destroyed in the age of Taurus as we pass through the toroid meteor shower. So this is the bull of heaven that Gilgamesh and Enkidu fights. Enkidu is a weird horned guy, best friend of Gilgamesh, and he dies during the fight. But during the fight, takes one of the legs off of the bull of heaven that Gilgamesh kills and throws it at Ishtar. So literally throws discarded meat at Ishtar, disgracing her. This is a transition from the most powerful goddess probably ever, Ishtar, and she's going into the age of the patriarchy. So she's being supplanted by Gilgamesh, and it's fucking horrible the way that he disrespects the goddess by throwing meat, throwing the thigh of a bull at her. It's insulting. But before that, Gilgamesh helped her chop down the tree and build her throne from the trunk and her bed from the base. And part of the branches, I think he turned to a like sash that holds weapons, some kind of sheath. There's no really direct translation of the word. But yeah, things tend to, like I said, switch syllables as you move from continent to continent or age to age, or they switch genders. Like I said, Ishtar switched to Adonis, Aphrodite to Adonis. As it switched cultures, it changed to Adam and Lilith, and then that was supplanted. It was like the Mesopotamian Fertile Crescent society dying off. So, like I said, Age of Taurus, very important. You have the expansion of Aryans into the Indian plateau, the subcontinent of India, the expansion of the Indo-European Empire, and of horse empires that started to spread, and light chariots coming from places like Matana, if you know what the Matana Empire was. These were typically ruled by Europeans or Indo-Europeans. They call it the Aryan expansion in the Age of Taurus. This was very big. Whereas the Semitic expansion happened in the Age of Aries, the age of the Jewish people, the age of, which is ironic because Aryans should be in the Age of Aries, but Aryans are in the Age of Taurus because Aries is the god of Mars and Mars is whatever. But like I said, the Aryan expansion was in the Age of Taurus. This is why you have a lot of the ruling class of the world having been redheaded or blonde-headed people. That's why Ishtar. Let's invert those syllables. Ishtar. And then you have there was a couple other Inyana. Okay, Inyana. Anya in Aryan. Or Tarish. Ishtar. Inyana. Anya in Aryan. This is why you see the proliferation of this goddess. There's so many different cultures. But yeah, alright. Ahuna Mata. Matana. Akuna Matata. Means no worries for the rest of your days. It's a problem-free philosophy. Ahuna Matana. Don't forget to wear your masks. As participants in the mass ritual, you are not pure after leaving your domicile unless you wear your mask before the profane. So, I like mine that has a wheat on it. Wheat is a very important symbol for some reason. Well, for many reasons. Alright, I'm trying to time this right for 33 minutes just because I'm weird like that. So, does anybody have anything to say in the next 47 seconds? It gets hot in here without my fan on. I have to turn it off, otherwise... Oh, that's what these buttons right here are. I can control light. I turn on extra lights so it doesn't get too much darker. But this turns on the fan. Just because I'm that lazy, I don't want to get up and turn on the fan. Isn't that horrible? If I were to turn off the other light, you could easily, I just control everything from my bed. I'm that much of a bum. Alright, 13 seconds left. Good to see you guys. May Ishtar be with you, and don't get dragged into the underworld by 5 demons. And if you do, ask the sun to turn into a snake. May Alice be with you. Later, guys.